2-minute warning. 2-minute warning. We will be live tonight in 2 minutes. Give a chance for the chat room to fill up. So good to see everyone here tonight. Got about 1 minute. We'll let the news run its thing for about 1 minute, and then we will bring you all in. That's right, DJ Adams. One love. Mark, good to see you out there. We are live on DLive, Twitch, Facebook, and YouTube, as well as we'll be streaming in just a couple minutes through the Truth Frequency Radio Network. About 45 seconds. Ten seconds. Snow and ice, Luis? Wow. No ice here. It was like, I don't know, 60 degrees here today. It was great. I went riding my bicycle today. All right. Let's go ahead and bring the studio in.
In a shooting in northeast Indianapolis overnight. Police Chief Randall Taylor.
What we saw this morning was a different kind of evil. What occurred this morning, based on the evidence that's been gathered so far, was a mass murder.
Police have not identified any suspects, but say the shooting does not appear to be random. Tampa Bay Buccaneers have won the NFC Championship, beating the Green Bay Packers 31-26. They'll face off in the Super Bowl against the winner of tonight's AFC title game between the Bills and the Chiefs. America is listening to Fox News.
If you're using anything other than Indeed,
your protection from deception. This is Truth Frequency Radio.
All right, all right. Good to see everyone out there. Richie, good to see you out there. And now I get it, Luis. You're driving through Arizona to do business in San Francisco. I get it now. The weather can get rather chilly out there in the Arizona desert. Wild Bill says he just recently finished watching the Wednesday show and he's here anyway. That's really great. I so appreciate you guys, and thanks for the support on Facebook this week. I had a interesting experience. I'll share it with you later. But right now we have a lot of stuff to go through, and I'm going to do a little bit of teaching today, something about fracking and some other things maybe you don't understand if have never been in the oil business. You don't know what it is, and it sounds so frightening and evil the way the current administration is putting it out there. So I want to begin a little bit today by talking about prophets and predictions. There is no question in anyone's mind that America is the greatest, richest, and most powerful nation in history. And yet, anyone can search the world's oldest manuscripts, tablets, inscriptions, and ne'er a mention of the coming of America can be found. No prophet, no seer, no revelator of old ever saw this. It was as though it never even crossed anyone's mind, including that of God's. Most people still believe that prophecy, true prophecy, is the mind of God shared with his creations through mouthpieces called prophets. Flawed individuals all. Oh, there have been many, and there have been even more who said they were, or reluctant saviors the people claimed were prophets, distinguishing the real from the unreal has been the bane of mankind since the earth cooled. Tea leaves, sweat lodges, songwriters, Simpsons writers, and a whole host of crystal crunchers have filled volumes with prophecies. The charisma of the prophet or the beauty of the prophetess makes it even more alluring. And heaven help us all if some prediction comes even remotely to pass. Then the record sales or book sales and TV interview requests go through the roof. And if you really want to go platinum, let that prophet die before the prediction comes to pass. I call that the Nostradamus Effect, especially if the prediction is so cryptic that it can only be validated after the event actually happens. And then, almost without fanfare or recognition, someone comes along that gets it right. They get it so right that when it happens, there is no doubt there is some direct connection with the future. Or perhaps this prophet has the ability to enlist enough believers that the resonant power of his prediction resonates with such power that he actually manifests that future. Call it a self-fulfilling prophecy. And here's what I say. Have I made connections like this to the future? Yes, absolutely. Not by choice, not by seeking. The visions come without notice, and certainly not by request. I've been able to do it since after the summer of my 9th year. I experienced what most people call a lost time incident. No, I don't think I was taken up in a ship or anything like that, but the documented turn in my life the following week after this event is evidence that some sort of massive download took place. My brother's 9 years older than me. He was in college when I was still in the 3rd grade. I launched out so far ahead of my class that my parents put me in military school to try to control me. When my brother bent to my mother's will, which was notoriously relentless, and gave me access to his chemistry or math books, I had no trouble keeping up. It scared him. It scared my mother. Sometimes it scared me. In 1965, I predicted the massive explosion of the Long Beach power station, live, right to my mother's face, who was sitting right next to me. I just suddenly said, I think the power station's going to explode. 30 seconds later, it did just that. It shattered windows for miles and sent metal and steam towering into the sky a few miles away. She cried. I treated it as though I had just read about it in the paper. I cannot count the number of times this has happened to me. I could see cards, predict wars, and even, yes, read people's minds. I could tell who was calling decades before caller ID. I had to learn one powerful and terrible lesson, though. I had to learn to keep my mouth shut. Not everyone learns this lesson. Their access to time is freely shared with anyone who will listen or buy a book or come to a live performance. Let me share with you some of these names. They each became immensely famous. They each garnered massive followings. Some became rich, and then the corruption of the truth set in, because that is what happens when you have a conflict of interest or when you think you can control the flow of information. You can't. No one can. Not even Jesus could control the flow of information all the time. Let me refer again to the mysterious appearance of America itself. You see, the future was well known to every single literate man and woman, or to anyone who could sit and listen to someone read to them. The biblical manuscripts that were collected into a library, a biblio, a Bible, were the source of this future. Humankind had been ruled by one power since the planet cooled. Lucifer was Lord of the earth, and he commanded all armies and kings and money. The only thing he could not command was the planet itself. It had a will of its own and often had an allergic reaction to the will of Lucifer as it manifested in the will of the people living on the earth. In 1775, a group of men began to have visions together. Those visions inspired them to do something that no one has ever done before and lived to tell about it. I say that because history is full of examples of this. I go all the way back to Agamemnon. I quote from Homer's book Iliad. My dear Menelaus, why are you so chary of taking men's lives? Did the Trojans treat you as handsomely as that when they stayed in your house? No. We are not going to leave a single one of them alive. Down to the babies in their mother's wombs, not even they must live. The whole people must be wiped out of existence, and none be left to think of them and shed a tear. These men lived for a while, before the global syndicate hunted the 56 signers of the Declaration of Independence down and killed them or destroyed them. They created a nation like none other, based on the premise that all men are created equal and have certain unalienable rights that come from God and not from government. They established a nation whose government would serve at the pleasure of the people. Of course, it was counter to prophecy. Did it make the prophets wrong? No, I don't believe so. They simply knew the future given to them, and they chose another one. It is called free will. I say that prophecy is a conditional prediction. If God is willing to give us one, or we are so gifted as to see one, then we are capable of choosing another path. No God or host of gods can take that away from us. We are the only sentient beings on this planet who can perceive time, and we can manipulate it within not many constraints, actually. For 244 years, the global syndicate has been trying to destroy America, and by doing so, to eliminate freedom and liberty from off the face of the earth. After their great defeat following the Civil War and the great bounty of the Industrial Revolution, they changed their tactics. They moved inside our government and sought to destroy it from within. They established the Federal Reserve to gain control over the money, and then they crashed the entire world in 1929 to plunge America so deep into the fascist control of the syndicate that all that was required was to let nature take its course. Then, just as the global syndicate was about to take complete control, in 2016, a miracle happened. We don't know why. America certainly did not deserve one. Well, let's flash forward to these few modern prophets, because I want to focus on a wound so fresh that almost everyone is still bleeding from it. Modern prophets began to have modern visions. They each predicted that President Trump was going to be elected, and then, remarkably enough, re-elected to a second term. You want me to read their names? Pat Robinson, Dana Coverstone, Mark Taylor, Kim Clement, Robin Bullock, Kevin Zadai, Tracy Cook, Denise Goulet. Interestingly, here are some specific details that these claim the Lord showed them. 2 assassination attempts will be made on Trump's life during his second term. That's Pat Robertson. Trump will win by a landslide. Bullock. Trump's victory will be challenged everywhere. Coverstone. Within 2 weeks of the election, the victory will be won. Cook. Trump will be filled with the Holy Spirit. Clement and Goulet. I predicted in 2011 a president would win by using almost entirely social media and hardly spending anything on TV ads, because patriots were getting their news from outlets like America Free Radio on their phones and not the networks. So what do we make of these prophecies? Well, let's begin with Scripture. Deuteronomy 18, verses 20 through 22. It tells us that when a prophet speaks in the name of the Lord, and it does not come to pass, then we know that that prophet has not heard from God. This passage demonstrates to us that God uses reality as a way to prove or disprove his presence. In other words, God's authority is not to be tested through subjective measures, but rather by objective means. God would not want us determining his voice because it felt like God, or because we feel we are familiar with his voice, or because we get chills whenever we think God speaks. Although those things may be important to us, God wants us to look to objective reality in order to determine what is true. I believe that this is the way God ordered our universe to operate. Reason and reality radiate from him as a byproduct of who he is. They belong to him. They are his tools. It's easy to see that Cook's prophecy that Trump's 2020 victory would be won within 2 weeks of the election did not come true. We've already passed the point of no return. Also, it appears that Bullock's prophecy of Trump winning by a landslide didn't materialize. But what about the remainder? Now, to be perfectly fair to those who have indicated that God had spoken to them about the 2020 election results, many believe that the matter is still unsettled. I gather from the chatter in the chat room that you do as well. 90% of Republicans and 57% of Democrats believe that the election exposed a multi-front war against our election system itself. Counterfeit ballots, hundreds of thousands of voting machines connected to China and Italy, and hundreds of lawmakers and governors choking down Chinese donations like they would never eat again, overwhelmed the prophets. Lucifer cannot see the future, cannot read minds, because he's not human like us. But he can hear every word that comes out of our mouths. He can syndicate global forces to accomplish his will. One of the noteworthy denials came from the Pennsylvania State Supreme Court. The court noted that in order to reverse the election results, one would expect Trump to, and I'm going to give you the list here, come formidably armed with compelling legal arguments and factual proof of rampant corruption. However, the court, without a single trial or argument under oath, hastily ruled that they had been presented with, and I quote, strained legal arguments without merit and speculative accusations, unpled in the operative complaint and unsupported by evidence, close quote. Examining the court's statement, there would appear to be one of two possibilities. Either there was not enough evidence for the court to overturn the results, or there was enough evidence for the court to overturn the results, but for whatever reason, they did not act upon it. It is only this first possibility that I would like to consider at this time. If it is true that there was not enough evidence for the court to overturn the election results, then we can conclude that the election was reasonably fair and Joe Biden won. Somehow, for the first time in history, a candidate could lose Florida, lose Iowa, lose Ohio by double digits, and still win the election. Somehow, a vice presidential candidate who never won an election against a Republican in her life and never earned a single delegate and could not raise a dime for her campaign was enough force to overcome the Trump economy. Somehow, a man who could fill a football stadium with red hats and flags and cheers with a 4-hour notice was defeated by a man who couldn't fill a sports bar with a month's notice and free drinks. If this is the case, then those who are still praying for a Trump victory are actually praying for God to steal the election. In other words, in this scenario, their petitions are for God to reverse a reasonably true result. I believe that this goes against the nature and character of God, since it would be unjust to overturn a fair election. One day, far in the future, if the syndicate does not fully accomplish its notorious Kennedy assassination methodology, we may learn the truth about what happened in 2020. On the surface, it does not appear that the Trump prophecies are genuine, since the courts are claiming there is a lack of evidence of fraud. However, if the prophecies are from God, then we should expect a win to come to pass somehow, some way, some miracle, Virtual Joe swinging the cudgel from the White House is proof enough that God was not speaking through the many prophets listed above, perhaps making them all false prophets. Joel prophesied about dreams and visions. In Joel chapter 2, verse 28, it says, "And it shall come to pass afterward that I will pour out my spirit upon all flesh. Your sons and your daughters shall prophesy. Your old men shall dream dreams, and your young men shall see visions." The very fact that Joel writes that dreams and visions will come indicates that they are not the same thing. Why else would Joel delineate between the two with the word "and"? But then again, as I said, prophecies are conditional predictions. If the founding fathers can chisel America out of stone and blood, surprising all the prophets of all time, cannot the global syndicate also apply their wickedness and power to thwart a prophecy made to an unworthy people? I believe so. I believe that's what we're witnessing. What are you saying? Lavender's saying in the TFR chat room. Let me see if I want to read this. Sometimes these get pretty Did you hear about the lady that followed Bill from Arkansas? She wound up dead in the lion's den at the National Zoo. The male tiger tried to drag her body away and bit her arm. The tiger almost died from the drugs in her system. Not newsworthy. Yeah. Well, I think you have to be pretty drugged up to get into a cage with a tiger. Interesting. Also, Lavender says, does nobody remember that when the Clintons rolled into D.C., Bill fired all U.S. attorneys and replaced them with his army? Oh, yes, we remember. And we remember a little bit how clumsy it was the other day when Virtual Joe and Jill went up the hill to the White House and couldn't get in because his staff had fired all the White House employees. First hour, gone. By the time they got there, nobody had the authority to open the doors for them, so they sat outside in the cold for an hour and a half. Interesting stuff. By the way, just to let you know, this is X Squared Radio, and I'm your host, Brooks Agnew, coming to you live through the America Free Radio studios, somewhere east of the Appalachian Mountains. This is where the past meets the future. In here, the results are always positive. Now, we might go a little past your imagination, but you have no fear. You'll be safely traveling with us. And just in case you want to be a member of the team, guess what we just got in? Oh, yes, brand new, individually packaged for freshness. The X Squared Radio hat. Oh, they're embroidered too. They're really nice. See here? It got the symbol right here. See, fully embroidered. Yeah, this is the good stuff. You can get this by going to my store, brooksagnew.com. Store. Easy enough. Right there on the top. You can see it being modeled by our professional model. No, not really. It's just me, but you can have one. Baba Susie already ordered one, or somebody did. I sent one out. In my next segment, by the way, we're just going to take a quick break here for the TFR studios because we are doing our best not to get copyright strikes. And some people who are running commercials on TFR are using copyrighted material, which ends up in my recording, which ends up getting me a strike. And I would really not rather have that because that way I can monetize the ads that YouTube puts on there, and we don't have any problems with Facebook or Twitch or DLive. And by the way, if you're listening on DLive, thank you so much for being there. I think what I'm going to do in this final minute, let me see if they fix this. I'm going to try to distribute the awards and see what happens. I'm now distributing awards. How about that? We're giving away lemons early. I went to DLive and I asked them why I was X-tagged, because this is basically a PG-13 program. We just talk about history and science and space stuff, and the occasional we get close to current events, but we don't do politics here, so I'm not really dangerous. All right, 4 seconds. We're going to find out who's getting these lemons. Check that out. All right, SSG Patriot and Rehab. All right, hang on a second here while I silence the studio for a little bit. So looks like S Sergeant Patriot, Staff Sergeant Patriot, and Rehab were distributed lemons. I'm going to do some more. Now that I've got the model working, we'll give away some more just to be connected to all my listeners on dlive.tv. And if you're not hooked up at dlive.tv, you should do so. It's free, and you can follow me for free. Now, if you subscribe to me on DLive, then a little bit of money each month goes into my account in the form of cryptocurrency, and it adds up, and we'll just give it all away. We'll just give it all away. What is that you said? Trump praised Jesus Christ for the first time publicly October 16th, 2020. That's when Jewish banker money abandoned him. That's Late Night Leroy. That's what he says on DLive. Yeah, it could be. It very well could be. Yes, lots going on in the chat room, but let's stay on point. I want to talk about the loss of the Republic, but it's not all doom and gloom. There is a chance for recovery. In the meantime, what I would like to do is share with you something that, let's see, make sure this is it. Nope, that's not the one I want to share. I'll share that in just a little bit. Hold on a second. Here we go. I wanted to let you know that my friend, Doc Skinner, has launched an Indiegogo campaign. And it's about his upcoming movie called Fly, The Rise of Jet Parker. And this is an amazing script. I've read it. It's taken a lot of generations. This is about indoor skydiving and even outdoor skydiving. But it is the young talent that is out there trying to become great at this sport. And it's going to be well shot, going to be well produced. And I just want you to look at all the ways that you can produce. As low as $10 and your credit goes in the movie. You can also get a cast photo, get a movie poster, soundtrack download. You get a limited I Support Fly shirt. You get a media bundle, which is all this cool digital stuff, which I'm showing you a little bit of it here on the left. Lunch with the cast members, and here's what really gets exciting. You could fly with a cast member, or you could go to the red carpet movie premiere. You could become an assistant producer, an associate producer, or a co-executive producer. How many times you get a chance to become actual part of a real movie? Huh? You don't. Not very often. We'll cover this again later on as we get going forward. Got about 5 seconds here. We'll bring the studio back in, and then we'll start our next segment. All right? So here we go. So it's rare. It's rare that it happens. Rehab is on D-Live for the first time, and it's the first time catching me live, so this is really good. And Raz, we waited for you, but we had to start right at 8 o'clock Eastern time. That's okay. That's what the archives are for. You can listen to them on YouTube or Twitch or D-Live or Facebook. They're all there. And the more you share them with your friends, the faster this grows and the more effect we can have. What is your thought in the Act of 1871? Do you believe we are a bona fide republic now? It's a good question. 1871, effectively, the United States was bankrupt. Well, they didn't want to let it be, reclaimed by the crown, but actually that's what happened. They ended up forming a corporation of the United States of America. And then, of course, as all publicly traded companies do, they sold stock. They sold stock in the corporation of the United States of America, and the Crown bought the shares, and the Vatican and others. And they have had more or less controlling interest ever since. Now, ostensibly, what may have happened is that during Trump's presidency, he ended the corporation of the United States of America, and we went back to being not all caps, but capitalized words, the United States, like Georgia and North Carolina and Nebraska, etc., of America, all sovereign states, instead of a giant corporation with regional managers that we call governors. And that's all I know about it. I haven't seen the evidence of that. But there's a lot going on there. So let's talk a little bit about this. I know I get your feelings. I see your emails. I read your Facebook posts, your Twitter posts, your Instagram posts. Yes, I'm on, what is it? Anon Up. And let's see, what's the other one? MAGA Chat. And I get your Telegram. I'm on all the social medias the same, except for Twitter. Twitter, I used to be Brooks Agnew, at Brooks Agnew, but sadly, Twitter felt that I was just a tad too dangerous for them, and they suspended me. So I started another Twitter account, and instead of at Brooks Agnew, it's at Agnew Brooks. Yeah, so you can follow me on Twitter at Agnew Brooks. It's the same, but at least I can respond, and that's kind of cool. Now, my old Twitter account had about, close to 6,000 followers, but this one only has about 60. So it's going to be up to you to build it back up again. I'm not putting any more money into Twitter, not after they betrayed you and betrayed me like that, because I'm not dangerous. But everywhere I turn and everywhere you turn, the news is bad. Between pending invasions, market crashes, gasoline prices skyrocketing, big pharma back in control, and the pending termination of the U.S. space program, again, I can scarcely find anything of merit to discuss without being negative. So I have resolved that in 2020, I'm going to turn over a new political page for America Free Radio. I was recently accused of being highly political by someone I greatly respect. Frankly, it kind of broke my heart. I was supposed to be on a spiritual roundtable Saturday, and people showed up. But before it got started, somebody went to my Facebook page, determined I was a little too toxic with my red hat and all, and that somehow I endorsed the riots in Washington, D.C., and so would I please just not show up. I was heartbroken, because I'm not like that at all. And where I was, there was no riot. I was there celebrating America and mourning the loss of the Republic, yes, but there was no riot. I vehemently disagree. I'm not political at all. I'm a scientist who asks questions I'm a historian who discusses facts. And I'm an intuitive with a gift for predicting outcomes and events in the future. I told you nearly everything that would happen, didn't I? I was so accurate that I was blamed for actually making it happen. I lost friends because I predicted the stealing of the election. I wrote about Trump's election 5 years before it happened. I got the 2016 election results a month before any other analyst in the known world. I predicted that 6 states would stop their counting, clear the room, and start stuffing ballots by the millions until they won. Because winning is everything. Once the win was announced, then any effort to discover the truth was classified as overturning the election results before the results were even known. Now, the republic is being stripped and shorn to the skin. The 4 years of Trump economics is over. $2 gas is gone. Cheap drugs, gone. Safe borders, gone. Low taxes, gone. Freedom of speech or to assemble, gone. Freedom to travel, shop, dine, or entertain in person, gone. Social media accounts, gone. Education has given way to indoctrination camps. Institutions are now beginning to revoke university degrees earned by Trump supporters. Banks, national retailers, and even airlines are being shut off to Trump supporters. We are all now deadly rioters. Constitution, gone. I told you that once America was destroyed, freedom and liberty would disappear from the earth for at least 2 generations. That's 50 years for those of you who attend government schools. I will be gone by then. So will my kids. My grandkids will never know what America was or what it stood for to the world. They will never meet the more than 1 billion people who looked to the sky for a sign that Donald Trump would finally win, finally defeat the Marxists, and usher in 1,000 years of peace and prosperity. The CCP will last for another 10 years, and then it too will succumb to the weight of its own gluttony. What was more painful for me? To know what would happen, or to watch it happen as predicted? I can't say. I only knew a few people who thought it would happen, and less than that who actually thought the global syndicate could overcome the largest voting bloc for the most popular president in U.S. history. Yet, I saw it. Over and over again, it woke me up in the middle of the night. I tried to tell you about it. I tried to warn you what was coming. And now it has soaked through the bandages. The prognostication is that the patient is dying. So for 2020, I'm going to stop sharing my predictions about the government. I don't want another voice added to the power of their resonant message of hatred and racism and class warfare. I cannot do this anymore. So we'll talk about space exploration for a few months, until it too is stripped of every penny to pay for Virtual Joe's insanity. We will talk about economics as the legs of free enterprise are amputated by Marxists who believe all jobs should be government jobs, and that the bane of humanity is the ownership of private property. After owning many homes and properties and selling them all to become debt-free, I never want to own another home. But that doesn't mean you should not be allowed to own one if you so choose. That will soon be against the law. All the equity in your income-producing properties will be confiscated and given to the banks who finance the universities to indoctrinate 2 generations of Marxists. Tens of millions of foreign citizens residing inside America will be made citizens, allowed to vote, and will be assigned congressmen of their very own, just like the congresswoman from Somalia. Tens of millions of more wait outside our borders, waiting for Virtual Joe to give the signal that it's okay for them to invade as well and receive the same benefits. With 30 million new voters, they will seize control of every state and all of the agencies for the next 100 years. And the real heartbreaker for me is that there is nowhere for us to go. Panama, Colombia, Portugal, Ecuador, Costa Rica will be no safe haven. Virtual Joe will terminate your access to your Social Security benefits if you reside outside the country. Chinese people cannot export money out of China. I know this. I met lots of them when I was in China. They all wanted to live in Oklahoma or Southern California, but they can't. They can come and they can gamble at Las Vegas or up in Canada, but then they got to go home. Americans will soon be banned from exporting money outside America. Cash is already the currency of crime. Don't get caught with too much, because the cops will simply take it from you without cause. They don't need it. The cash itself is committing the crime by being outside the bank. So the only place we can go is that secret place. Like Christians have lived for millennia, we must profess nothing. We must not pray in public. We must not attend church, sing hymns, or express our liberty in any way. When they say the word unity, they mean kneel before them. Apparently, humans crave subjugation. Remember, there will always be men like them. Come on, man. I'll play a little piece for you just to bring this to your remembrance.
Kneel. I said. Kneel! Is not this simpler? Is this not your natural state? It's the unspoken truth of humanity that you crave subjugation. The bright lure of freedom diminishes your life's joy in a mad scramble for power, for identity. You were made to be ruled. In the end, you will always kneel.
Not to men like you.
There are no men like me.
There are always men like you.
Sorry, I cut my microphone there for a second. I wanted to eliminate the echo. I was saying that our media always warns us that these things are coming. We want to fight it, but we can't because they keep us scattered, they keep us scared, they keep us overwhelmed. They hear what we say, they see what we do, and they can react, and they can counteract and counterattack. And that's what they do, and that's what we see. And it is coming. So, by the way, I wanted to give you a little education in fracking, because a lot of people ask me, what is fracking? It's such a weird word. What does that mean, fracking? It's short for fracturing. So what they do in the drilling of an oil well, they then take casing and they push the casing down into the ground, far below where the oil zone or the gas zone that they're trying to reach is located. And then, as is represented by these marshmallows, then they set packers in the pipe. And then what they do is they inflate the packers. You see that? So here we have this casing. It's down in the ground. And these nice, yummy, unroasted marshmallows are the packers. So they basically seal off the hole in this area. They're not interested in fracturing this area. They're not interested in fracturing this area. Only this area where the shale is, where the petroliferous zone is. So once they have this packed off, then they go down in this section right here, there are holes in the casing. They pressurize the casing with acid. And the acid goes back into that petroliferous zone, probably hundreds of yards to maybe a few thousand feet in every direction. It soaks into the formation and dissolves looseness out of the way so that the gas and the oil can flow back to this hole, back to this casing, and be pumped to the surface. That's what fracking is. Now, the distance between here and here is sometimes 15,000 feet. Yeah, sometimes it's 3,000 or 4,000 feet. Anyway, surface water that we use to water our crops or feed our cities, the aquifer, is usually about 300 or 400 feet below the surface, maximum. Usually the wells around here are about 150 to 200 feet deep. So way, way below where the surface water is. This fracking does not pierce the rock above it. It doesn't pierce the rock below it. It only goes out into the loose area that is known as the petroliferous zone. And that's how fracking is done. No, it doesn't cause earthquakes. No, it doesn't ruin the environment. In fact, it's designed to protect the environment. That's why the process is called long stringing. They don't just use the hole, they case the hole with steel in order to prevent the petroleum, which is pumping up from deep in the earth, from contaminating any of the soil or the surface water. And that's how it's done. That's how it's done. All right, let's talk a little bit about economics. Yes, Jacob, that's a good point. Keep in mind that these casings are up to and sometimes longer than 5 miles. That's right. That hole is completely sealed with steel going all the way to the bottom. There's no way for oil to escape that steel casing. Fracking only occurs where the thin layer, like you have stacked stone below it and stacked stone above it, and that thin layer in between the stone, in order to get the gas and oil to flow to the hole. Anyone who's afraid of that, I worked in the industry, been around it a lot, seen it happen, seen them frack holes before. It is completely safe and environmentally protects the environment. That's why they invented it. All right, let's go. Let's keep going here. I want to talk about Yellonomics. Yes, it's 24-12. Kansas City's up in the third quarter. Just so you know, my other monitor over here has the game in silence on the side. I might suddenly cheer, but everything's under control. I'm not in pain. Soon to be confirmed, U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen made the case earlier this past week for many more trillions in stimulus and infrastructure spending. Spend. All, of course, will be financed out of thin air. That's right. And rationalized, given the viral shock to the economy and still current historically low interest rate regime. And we know who is responsible for that, don't we? Of course, ours is not the only privately owned central bank in the world creating currency out of thin air and adding to their balance sheet. This year, 2021 I'm talking about, we can again expect the private Federal Reserve's balance sheet to balloon as the U.S. government rolls over and finances a record $8.5 trillion in government IOUs. Simultaneously this week, as Janet Yellen was selling our spending many more trillions we have not saved, we have not earned, we have no way to earn, a record-sized one-day inflow of over $500 million showed up in the silver derivatives market. Remember I told you, 25% of your ongoing liquidity, I'm not talking about you got to have cash to pay your house payment. Don't buy silver if that's the case. Don't buy silver if you have debt. If you have debt, forget about it. Pay the debt off first and then buy the silver. Silver bulls are again laying down long bets, assuming silver spot prices will rise given all the upcoming trillion in stimulus behind and ahead. This week we had the largest one-day silver derivative capital inflow in over 8 years, mainly into the what are called special purpose vehicles. Okay? And by the way, J.P. Morgan has the largest silver vaults that are known in the world. There may be bigger ones in China, but I don't think so. J.P. Morgan has the biggest silver vault on the planet. And they're long on silver, but they're also short on silver. I don't think it's illegal, but it's definitely unethical. A $500 million bet in silver is currently over 20 million troy ounces or 600 metric tons. Humans, that would be us, we produce about 2.2 million ounces of new silver ore per day. For perspective. Not even close. Not even close. It means that if investors start buying up the silver, there's not going to be enough silver for what silver is really used for. I don't mean sitting in bars in your cigar box like mine. I mean used in electronics, used in solar panels, used in satellites, used in cell phones. Yeah, that's silver. And the gold-silver ratio is still hovering in the low 70s at the moment. The silver price in Mexican pesos is like the silver price in Indian rupee terms. Beginning this year, only a few good trading days away from record high prices. Given that Mexico remains the world's largest silver producer because they mine it, their soon record silver price foreshadows where we are all headed, more shortly than later, denominated in every fiat currency around the world. I'm looking at the charts. I wish I could explain them to you in detail, but I can't. General commodity values appear to be turning up after a 12-year downtrend. And the downtrend was because of massive shorting of the metal. It should be much higher. It's no surprise to see platinum showing buoyancy above 1,000 per troy ounce to begin this year. If we are indeed turning the corner for a coming commodity bull market now, This now 100 years historical premium of gold over platinum will likely tighten back toward historic norms later this decade. Turning to the ongoing mania in U.S. stock markets, insider stock trading versus buying by corporate executives has recently hit an all-time high. I talked about this last month. It's when you can borrow money, the corporation can borrow money, and they can buy their own executive stock back. It's called a stock buyback. It makes the executive quite wealthy without hurting the stock price on the open markets. Today, we witnessed Gamestop. You know Gamestop, don't you? You see them in the mall. You can buy from them online, blah, blah, blah. Hey, we're going to take a quick break with TFR, and I'll finish this. So hang on one second. The music should be creeping in here. All right, park the studio for a little bit. GameStop. We witnessed their stock hit a record price based on a short squeeze mainly pushed by call option buying crowds from a subreddit called Wall Street Bets. It wasn't really on earnings. It was on speculation on the stock. And that's going on in a lot of places in the market because the stock market's high, because there's a lot of money and there's a lot of value floating around. But there aren't earnings to back it up. Now, yes, I mean, a lot of people have been home because of COVID. And what are you going to do in your home? Play video games. And who supplies the video games? GameStop. You see, I invest in a company that owns Candy Crush. And it's been doing well all year. I've made like 27% on that investment. Not bad. Not bad at all. Based on next to no real company fundamentals, but more so a short squeeze on these call option market makers and the shorts. The stock price within a handful of months went from its all-time low to an all-time high, and it was reached today, or actually Friday. At the start of the year, Berkshire Hathaway billionaire Charlie Munger had a gloomy take on where the U.S. stock market is headed this decade in real value terms. So, as we look out to the other building wall of debt and seemingly infinite stimulus about to be imposed into our financial system by Yellonomics, we think about the future, and we are left to ponder. Because how in the hell are we going to get from the hundreds of trillions of dollars in unfunded liabilities? Oh yeah, hundreds of trillions, more than the earth can produce. Yeah, these are debts, and they're promise piles collectively coming due. Guess when? This decade. Yeah, it's 2020. By 2030, these all have to be paid back, and there ain't enough money. What happens once Yellonomics begins raising the interest on this growing debt? Oh, it will easily overwhelm the diverging revenue growth, which will have immediate effect on everyone's faith in the system. And once that faith is gone, the entire economic system will collapse like a black hole. Well, an over 5-decade Wall Street market veteran last year expressed his take on the endgame and the transition phase for the U.S. ahead. And in his website, he writes, he is 100% certain that it will not end in bankruptcy. Seriously. His certainty and confidence makes sense. After all, the Federal Reserve and U.S. Treasury have an infinite fiat currency creating keyboard at their disposal. They just print more money. Yes. Instead, his belief is in the system's end. That means it's over. We'll bring TFR back in. So what does that mean, that it's over, that the economic system is over? Well, the transition will be through eventual hyperinflation, where we nominally devalue these seemingly ever-growing promise piles, these derivatives they're called, into a handful of painful months. In other words, we write it off. We write it down. We take a discount. We take a haircut, as President Trump would say. Hyperinflation, by the way, is usually in the 200 to 1,000% range. Just ask the people who live in Mexico. Of course, it could take years for this to happen. The misery and loss of buying power between now and then will require drastic cost-cutting measures in the exchange system. And that means, as I predicted, the end of cash. All money will have to go digital, so the Fed can control interest rates on a day-to-day basis. If you have cash, there will come a time when you have to turn it into the bank to be able to use it. Places of retail will simply stop taking cash. If you don't believe me, you just try to go buy breakfast at McDonald's at the drive-thru tomorrow morning at 6 o'clock. Good luck using cash. You'll get used to it. But it is a real possibility, given that record in-debt governments often choose inflation over bankruptcy as the easier way out when cornered by their collective actions. That's what Yellonomics is all about. Money from nothing and the chicks for free. I recommend you convert your ongoing liquidity. Like if you have a balance of $5,000 or $6,000 or $7,000 cash in your checking account ongoing from month to month, you should consider converting 25% of that to metal. Because if the cash goes away, if the cash has a hiccup, the metal will always spend. And if we get to hyperinflation, 50%, 60%, 100, 200%, guess what's not affected? The value of silver or gold. And you can still buy silver for $28 an ounce with free shipping. Silver will always spend, just like money, except there ain't no counterfeit silver. For the Federal Reserve, this time is really different. Having learned a hard lesson in the last recovery, oh yes, it definitely recovered in the last 4 years. Don't tighten monetary policy too early. The central bank is leaning in the opposite direction. In practice, that means the Fed will not just emphasize actual inflation over forecasted inflation, but will also attempt to push the inflate rate above its 2% target. It's a whole new ballgame because they have to do it. They have to do it to avoid bankruptcy. The Fed's traditional Phillips curve approach to forecasting inflation, which relies on the theory that, inflation accelerates as unemployment falls, blah, 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 was widely criticized during Trump's recovery. Inflation remained quiescent in the wake of the great financial crisis, even as the unemployment rate fell to 3.5%, well below the 2012 high estimate of the natural rate of 5.6%. The Fed's commitment to Phillips curve-based inflation forecasts induced it to raise interest rates too early in the cycle, and they killed the economy. They stifled it. They choked it off. And the Fed was eventually forced to lower the rates 75 basis points in 2019 to put a floor under the economy. And inflation still remains stubbornly below the Fed's 2% target throughout that year. You know why? Because we grew. Because we grew. Because people were working and people were buying stuff, and they weren't printing money. We were making money. No longer are estimates of longer-run unemployment taken as almost certain, indicating the economy is at full employment. Instead, the Fed is said that they must focus on achieving employment outcomes with the kind of breadth and depth that were only achieved late in the previous recovery. The Fed is going to try to run the economy hot. You know why? Because they want to push down unemployment, of course. And yet, Virtual Joe is getting ready to import millions more of unskilled labor. Just pile them on in here. Take those jobs. All the Hispanics, all the Asians, all the blacks, all the first-time workers coming into the system at minimum wage and gaining their skills for the first time, they're going to be pushed out on the streets. By de-emphasizing the Phillips curve, the Fed loses its primary inflation forecasting tool. It means they're running blind, which Yellonomics is famous for. Instead of an inflation forecast, the Fed will rely on actual inflation outcomes to determine the appropriate time to change policy. In other words, they're going to be lagging. And you know what it's like when you lead from behind, don't you? Research suggests that refraining from liftoff until inflation reaches 2% is going to lead to some modest temporary overshooting. You know why? Because you can't predict. You can only react. And guess what's going to happen? Overreaction. Every single time. Hold on to your silver. By the way, when you convert your cash into silver, don't convert all of it, because I can tell you right now, you're going to need some liquidity. When you park that money in silver, you're waiting. You're waiting for a big downside. That downside happens, you're protected, you're hedged against it. Think about what she is saying. Traditionally, the Fed attempts to reach the inflation target from below, effectively using the unemployment rate to forecast inflation and then moderating growth such that, projected inflation doesn't exceed its target. You try to slow it down by tapping the brakes before you get to the stoplight. Well, others are saying that the Fed should not tighten policy until actual inflation reaches 2%. Policy lags, not leads. The time between the Fed's actions and the resulting economic outcomes. It means you got to be quick. Got to be quick. If you're not quick, you're going to lose control. It means inflation will subsequently rise above 2%. It will. Because you can't stop printing the money as a reaction to the market. You have to do it as a cause to the market. Federal Reserve Bank of Philadelphia, the president is Patrick Harker, and he goes even further in a Wall Street Journal interview. He said, and I'm going to quote here, "I don't see any need to act anytime soon until we see substantial movement in inflation to our 2% target, and ideally overshooting a bit. Expect to see more Fed speakers also say they want inflation at or above 2% before they tighten policy." You'll recall that these Fed officers, these Fed board members, were put there by President Trump. Yes, Trumponomics is controlling the Fed. That's why we're not going to Yellonomics as quickly as she wants to. Just because she's the Fed chair doesn't mean she rules the board. It means she speaks for the board. She advises the board, but she can't overrule the board. The board was set by Donald Trump. It's interesting. It's going to be very interesting to watch this. So there's a little bit of chatter on fracking. I can see that in the chat room. So let me add a little bit more here to this because it's important that we get this straight. Trump said over and over that Biden would ban fracking, and the media would called him a liar. Okay, Biden lied, and the media backed him up. When he cancels the fracking, tens of thousands of jobs will be lost. He also ended the Keystone Pipeline this week. Somewhere between 40,000 jobs, 30 and 40,000 jobs terminated, just like that. All those homes, all those cars, all those student loans, all the toys, all the furniture payments, all the credit card payments, not going to get made. Not only that, the banks that financed all the pipe, the equipment, the trucks, the excavators, the huge backhoes, all of the tanks and pumps and stands and everything, all that pipe laying on the ground, none of it gets paid for now. The banks will look for a bailout, and you will be the ones bailing them out. Okay? Jen Psaki, who, I can't say anything about her. I can't say anything about her because I can't say anything nice, so I'm not going to say anything. But she stated last night that Biden is planning to begin his fracking ban soon. Oh, yeah. No. I'm not putting words in her mouth. Here's what she said. When a reporter asked, President Biden promised to end all new oil and gas leasing on federal lands when he was a candidate. Does the administration still have that commitment today to end that lease? And here's what Psaki said. We do. And the leases will be reviewed by our team. We just have only been in office for less than a day now. Doesn't matter. We terminated 40,000 jobs anyway. We've been in office less than a day. You see, the government owns much of the land in the United States. We're talking about federal lands, right? Federal lands. How much is federal lands? In fact, the federal government owns more than 640 million acres of land, or about 28% of the land mass in America. A lot of people don't know that. They don't know that. They also don't know it owns 84.5% of Alaska. Yeah. It owns 69.1% of Utah. It owns 57.4% of Oregon, 53.1% of Idaho, 50.2% of Arizona, 48.1% of the state of California, 45.3% of Wyoming, 42.3% of New Mexico, 41.8% of Colorado. It's crazy. It's crazy. They will terminate the fracking industry, just like it terminated the XL pipeline last week. All I heard all my life was that we needed to be energy independent. And now that we are going the opposite way. Virtual Joe has canceled the Keystone Pipeline, which means the owners, the Canadians, they're going to have to sell to China, making China even more powerful. We will once again depend on the Middle East, making them center stage. It will also cost 20,000 American workers jobs per year. Oh, yeah. We're not just talking about the pipeline people. There's support jobs, and then support jobs for the support jobs. 20,000 jobs per year just from that one stroke of the pen. One single swipe. Virtual Joe lied, and the media backed up the lie. Social media wouldn't allow anyone to say otherwise. The Sentinel posted on a Facebook page called Capitalism with just under 1 million likes and nearly 1 million additional followers. That's a lot for Facebook. They were taken down suddenly without explanation. One of the things we did get a strike for, they said, was an article about Virtual Joe saying he would ban fracking. Their fact checkers said it was false. Well, I'm here to tell you tonight that all the fact checkers who disagree with what I say right here on this topic are lying to you. The Washington Post and others said it was false to claim Virtual Joe would ban fracking. Once they were faced with the facts and not their propaganda echo chamber at NPR, the Washington Post took it back. without apologies and said that it confirmed on the debate stage that Virtual Joe said he would ban fracking. He was obviously always going to ban fracking, and the media knew it. Now, the Communist Chinese Party owns the Canadian oil output. They own our government. They want all sources of U.S. energy gone. Ending oil, ending coal, ending natural gas from federal lands will send us back to a more primitive time. You better get used to walking. And you can be sure the elites won't run out of heat or air conditioning. I will say this. If you love wearing sweaters inside all winter, you're going to love socialism. Get ready. Sip of water here. What is it? 3115 Kansas City. Checking the chat room here. Yes, American taxpayers will pay for it all. Well, there won't be many. Yeah. Well, Mark, I know you have your feelings. He calls me a fracking ice hole. Yeah. Facts are on my side. Life Dweller, good to see you on YouTube. What's wrong with banning fracking and ending coal, petroleum, and gas? We should have free energy by now. We should have the technology to travel by thought by now. Right on. I'm ready for that. Melinda says, I'm ready. Been ready for years. You know, I spent a lot of money researching what's called free energy. I did. There was listed on several websites 100, and actually there were about 36 that I went and visited. Free energy technologies. Oh, yeah, very cool stuff. Very cool websites, very convincing videos. So I went there. I bought the tickets. I flew there myself. I went to their labs. I watched their demonstration. You know me. I mean, if it's real, I'm going to bring it. Every single one of them. Searle and all the others. I've seen them all. They're all fake. Every single one. Elaborate, but fake. No free energy. I became such an activist in this years ago that I said, you guys need to stop using the term over unity and free energy. It's killing you. They're painting you with a broad brush of a crystal cruncher. You know what a crystal cruncher is, right? Yeah, crystal cruncher. People in California know what one is. You know, just out there. It isn't real. There is no free energy. There is no free lunch. Now, there is, I think, a way to coax energy to come into our dimension from another dimension. We haven't figured that out yet. But, you know, electricity is a little bit like that. Oh, we take a magnet and we rub it by a copper wire, and magically electrons flow out of the copper. Yeah, imagine that. We don't know where the electrons come from. We just know they never stop. They never stop. This program is coming to you right now, courtesy of the mysterious electron that is coming into our dimension from God knows where, because we know how to rub magnets next to metal. Hey, that's about as free energy as you're going to get. Now, it takes work because, you know, there's a resistance as the field builds up. It takes energy. That's why when you turn your headlights on, your engine idles down a little bit, because it takes energy to run the magnet past the wire to make the power to run the headlights. Of course, I have LED lights, so they don't do that anymore. But halogen lights, they can draw like 35 amps. It takes a little bit for that alternator to make that power in your vehicle. It takes work. If you ride a 10-speed or a road bike like I do, and you have one of those little, you know, rubby generators that rubs against your tire, against the side of your tire, go ahead and flick that baby in tonight while you're out riding. See if it doesn't slow your bike down and you have to pedal a little harder. You know why? Because it takes work. It takes work to generate the electricity. It ain't free. It ain't free. It can be efficient. It can be made more efficient with gold wire and superconducting magnets and all that, but not free. I know you're saying you think there's free energy technology out there. There ain't. I've been to all the labs. I've held the technology in my hands. It's all fake. All fake. The only free lunch you really get is from wind or from solar. And it is so inefficient. 15% at best. At best. That means for every photon that strikes the ground or strikes your solar panel, 15% of it can be converted at high noon into electricity for a while, because the solar panel wears out. It oxidizes. It's only good for 25 years, maybe. Every year, that solar panel loses about 5% of its ability to convert sunlight into electricity. Every year. All those solar farms you see out there, except for the ones that use a mirror to reflect the sun's rays at a solar collector up on a tower. But all the ones that are just solar panels out there laying on a farm, great, wonderful. But why do you think your electric rates went up? Because the solar is not very efficient. In fact, it's providing us power when we don't need it. It's providing us power at high noon, and we don't need the energy until about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Just ask Hawaii. It's all wrong. Now, there are ways to fix it. We could put the solar panels in space. And if we put the solar panels in space, guess what? The panels don't oxidize because there ain't no oxygen. But then you have to convert the solar energy in space. All you have to do is go back and look at my lab notebooks from 30 years ago, and you'll see this. The solar panels in space can convert sunlight much more efficiently because there's no air blocking all the photons that go straight into the panel. You might be able to get up to 20, 30% efficiency. And you convert that energy into radio waves, and then you beam the radio waves down to a receiving antenna on the ground, or several antennas on the ground. And then those antennas convert that radio wave to 60 cycles, which is what we see on our electrical lines, and take that high voltage and boost it to where it goes out to the neighborhoods. And then you lower the voltage, increase the current, and deliver it to the houses. And guess what? There's no shade. The solar panels are there all the time. They're all the time out there. They're out there at geosynchronous orbits, and they see the sun all the time. The Earth doesn't block the sun from them. We could put solar power stations on the poles of the moon. Yes, we could. Hundreds of miles of them if we want to. And they'd get sunlight 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, no clouds, no nothing to get in the way on the north and south pole of the moon. They could convert it to energy, beam it the couple 100,000 miles to Earth in a form of a laser beam, pick it up with a receiver on the ground, and pump it out. Is it free energy? Hell no. It takes infrastructure to put all that stuff together. It takes infrastructure to put it all together. We could go to fusion with helium-3. There's 1,000 years. No, I take that back. 10,000 years of energy on the moon. Yeah, there's enough to run our current technology for 10,000 years. Of course, assuming we get that kind of energy, the population of the Earth will grow. So we're probably looking at 1,000 to 2,000 years, but still, that's a long time from one body in space. And guess what there are out there? Millions of bodies in space, just out beyond Mars, just in the belt. And we could move the energy to Mars or the moon or keep it in space if we want to. Fusion rocketry would open the entire solar system and beyond to us. Is it free? No, it's not. That's probably the technology the UFOs use. They have figured out a way to do fusion of helium-3 inside their spacecraft in small reactors. They don't need cities to create these magnetic crushing reactors in order to create the fusion. They can do it on a very small basis, and they can deliver enough energy to run their magnets to create their thrust. Is it free? No. Is it ready? No, not ready. We're getting there, but it's going to take a lot more work. It's going to take a lot more energy. It's going to take a lot more focus to get there. And I don't think that's what Virtual Joe has in mind. I don't. I'm going to park TFR, Truth Frequency Radio, where the Truth Freaks hang out just a little bit. Just a little bit. So we're probably 30 years away from making it happen in a big way on the Earth. I think we could do it much faster than that on the moon or even in space, because we have weightlessness in space where we can manipulate and work with the plasma a lot easier than trying to control it with magnetic fields here on the Earth. The tokamak and the stellarium and the ITER, which is the big system they're building in France. Crazy size of this thing. I don't think they'll ever finish it, to tell you the truth. And I think when they get it done, they're going to fail. Just too many things to go wrong. And all this is good, Scott. That's a good point. What about harnessing marine currents, like in Fisher's Island Sound in the race? All that's good. I've seen what are called tidal generators. Not so much near the equator, because you don't have tides. But as you get toward the extreme low latitudes, like you get to the 20th parallel, the 38th parallel, way up there. I'm sorry, the high latitudes, anywhere from 40 to 80. The tides are tremendous. They go up and down 30, 40, 50 feet. Well, that means that water's flowing through these bay openings. And what I've seen is proposals for tidal generators. These are slow turbines that take water force, like a water wheel, except they very efficiently turn it into generating power. So when the tides are moving, these things are generating electricity. Do they work? Yes, they do. They do work. They're high maintenance because they sit in salt water, so you have typical problems that occur with that. I've also seen them so large that they can actually make a bridge over the top of them. So the water's actually flowing through this bridge and generating electricity. But these generators are very expensive to build, and there are not many companies building them. And windmills too. I get the wind, but the thing about a windmill is they erode very quickly. The generators are not very efficient. The gearboxes typically catch on fire. And if you consider the energy that it takes to forge and make the windmill, you never get that energy back out in the life of the windmill. You just don't. I've seen, we were going to rent out our building in Idaho to a company that refurbished windmill blades. Yeah, the windmills had only been up for a couple of years, but the blades erode in the wind. The wind etches the fiberglass away on the blades. And so what they would do is they bring these 90-foot long blades in, sand them down, relaminate them, and recoat them, and send them back out. And it's expensive to do, and time-consuming, and not very friendly to the environment, because the rosins that they use really off-gas a lot of terrible monomers. And the issue is that it costs as much to relaminate a blade as it does to make a new blade. And the bad thing is, the blades are not recyclable. They can't be burned. They can't be used for energy. And so you know what they do when they've run their life out? They cut them up into short segments and bury them in the ground. I'm sorry. Windmill is a joke. A wind generator is a joke, especially the big ones. The small one on your farm probably can work. You get a half dozen car generators and you hook it to a good size multi-blade windmill on your property, and when the wind blows, you can make energy. And you could charge batteries, and you can have energy for a few hours at night, and then turn your lights out and wait for the next windy day to charge them up again. But you become linked to nature. If the wind doesn't blow, you're screwed. You founder, just like a sailing ship with no wind in the ocean. Oops, got a little bit beyond my time there with TFR. Bring TFR back in. Welcome back, Truth Frequency Radio listeners. Sorry about it. I missed the music by about a minute, so sorry about that. We're talking about energy and free energy or high efficiency energy or some of these energy technologies. I've seen them all. I've been to all the labs. I've been to wind generators. Believe me, I use solar panels on my electric trucks. I know all about the solar panels. I know about microinverters. I know about combiner boxes and inverters. I've consulted with solar panel companies. I know what I'm talking about. They're not very efficient. Not very efficient at all. And there are all kinds of windmills. But the more work you have to do, the harder it is on the bearings and the gearbox. And it will wear out. What is it, LB? Hotter than the core of the sun, China has a nuclear-powered artificial sun fusion. Korea has another version, and France. Mining on the dark side of the moon, used during an ice age. Yes, except no one has actually harnessed fusion on the Earth. We've done fusion with helium-3 and deuterium. We've done tritium. But you know what it takes to get it started? It takes an atom bomb to get it started. Cold fusion is an academic accomplishment. What we want is hot fusion. You know what that means? Once you get the little beggar going, you can just keep feeding it fuel. Keep feeding it fuel. And the plasma will continue, and it will make energetic protons. No neutrons, just energetic protons and heat. That's what you want. Nobody has done it yet. Nobody. Everything you're reading in the press is fake. It's all fake. It's all designed to raise money. It's all fake. Nobody has done it. The Chinese haven't done it. The Koreans haven't done it. The Japanese have been working on it for 40 years. I did my senior paper on fusion. ITER is not even close. It's going to be another 3 decades before just the building is done. The tokamak never worked. The stellarium never worked. It never made net energy. It didn't work. You know why? I think, my opinion, is because they're doing it here on Earth. They need to do it in space. They need to do it on the moon, where there's no oxygen to get in the way. Right now, it takes weeks and weeks and weeks to get the air out of the system so you can try the plasma. It's just not going to work. Not going to work. It's like Prometheus. You got to get the fire going before it does you any good. Believe me, you could sit there and you could warm your soup by rubbing 2 sticks together, and you could make the heat. But isn't it so much nicer when you reach the activation energy and you actually make fire? Then you don't have to rub the sticks together anymore. You just pile more sticks on the fire. The rapid oxidation takes care of the problem because the energy it releases is way more than the activation energy needed to start oxidizing the cellulose. Sorry, that's the way it works. That's real science. Diane says, my nephew is working in research, making batteries using carbon. They have it working, but won't hold charge in cold temperatures. Yes, all batteries have that problem, Diane. And the reason is because the flow of electrons depends upon a semi-liquid we call electrolyte. In order for the electrons to get close to the plate that they're going to conduct to, that they're going to release their electrons to, like a car battery, that electrolyte needs to be liquid enough to make that happen. Well, a lot of these are gel-type electrolytes, or they're very thick, kind of pasty electrolytes, as we see with lithium ion or lithium iron phosphate or lithium titanate or lithium manganese or manganate or lithium air batteries. Carbon is just the electron transfer. That's all it is. It doesn't generate. It's just the group 8 metal that makes everything flow. You have to be able to store the electrons somewhere. You store it on ions. You store it either in 2 oxidation states, which is our sulfuric acid, H2SO4. The 2 protons, the 2 hydrogens, okay, once it's in solution, that's what the sulfate ion can carry. 2 volts. 2 volts. That's why you have 6 cells in your car battery. 2 times 6 is 12. You have a 12-volt system in your car. That's what it runs on. Lithium has 3, actually 3.2. 3.2 volts. And that's all you're going to get ever out of it. Now you can stack them together, which is what we do to get the voltage up to 600, or we use 156 volts, but a lot of the people use higher voltage. You stack them together in series and you get more voltage. But you can't charge them that way. No. You can't charge them that way. You can put battery management systems on it, but eventually you're going to overcharge and ruin one of those cells. Trust me. You see enough Teslas burn up, that's exactly what it comes from. It's not perfected yet. Not perfected. That's why it doesn't work in cold weather. You have to warm the batteries up, and then the electrons can flow. See, there are flaws in these things. They work fine in Hawaii. They work fine in the summertime in Arizona, but they don't work fine in North Dakota. They don't work fine in Canada. They don't work fine in the Northern California area because you don't get the range out of it. I have friends that own Leafs, the Nissan Leaf. At best, 80 miles on a warm day. On a cold day, 45 or 50 miles. They get used to it. They manage their routes and get used to it, but that's the limit. That's the limit. And eventually those batteries drain down. Batteries are the way we do it, and here's why. Because let's just compare capacitors to batteries. Okay, a capacitor can charge up millions of times, hundreds of millions of times, because it works off of a dielectric. It's a separation between 2 plates. We're going to build up all the electrons on this side and no electrons on this side. And then we're going to connect to it. And guess what's going to happen? The electrons are going to jump through our conductor over to the other side, thus powering our circuit, right? Right. The issue is, as soon as the capacitor begins discharging, the voltage is linear. It goes straight down to 0. And once the capacitor is spent, it's at 0 volts. But let's just say you have 100 volts on it. That's a pretty good capacitor. That'll snap you pretty good. The instant you connect it to a circuit, it goes 99, 98, 97, 96. It goes straight as an arrow right down to 0. Depends on the rate at which you exhaust it. But the issue is the voltage is changing all the time. That's why we use batteries. Because batteries will stay at the same voltage until they reach a threshold. They'll go along at 12 volts, 12 volts, 12 volts, and then all of a sudden, they'll drop to 11.5, and then 10, and then 9, and you're dead. Lithium goes a little bit longer than hydrochloric acid, which is a regular acid battery, be it gel or be it wet cell like we have in your cars. But that's the difference. Batteries stay constant voltage way out there, and then they fall off. And you can use a combination of capacitors and batteries, and you can use the capacitors to recharge the batteries for a while. But remember, the voltage drops off. It's no good to the battery. You need the same voltage as the battery all the time. And capacitors are transparent to high frequency, and they are oblique, or that is to say, obtuse. They block low frequency. So the lower the frequency, the higher the resistance of the capacitor. The higher the frequency, the lower the resistance of the capacitor. Exactly the opposite with coils. The higher the frequency, the more resistance in the coils. The lower the frequency, the less the resistance in the coils. So that is what's putting it all together. All this technology is out there. We've known about it for 40 years. It's getting better. It's getting more efficient. It's getting smaller. It's getting more easy to work with. We can put it in little teeny tiny thin packages like this, and it will last a long time. It'll last for days if you don't make a bunch of phone calls. Actually, texts burn up a battery in a cell phone faster than anything. What is that, Scott? I can go for 2 minutes without stopping. Eesh, that came out weird. Yeah, let's not talk about that. And Mark, that's a good point. He says, well, someone better tell all these cats headed to Mars because it's freaking cold there. He says fracking cold there, but that's pretty right. It is a little like being on Mount Everest. You're going to need some oxygen to help you out because it's going to be really cold. Like it can, on a warm day, it can get up to about 11 C, which is 50 to 52 degrees, something like that. Bearable, but chilly. And when the sun goes down in the late afternoons, and the Martian day is a lot longer than our day, but or the wind starts blowing, it can get down to, sub-zero pretty quickly. You're going to need some help. You're going to need shelter. And you're going to need oxygen. Now, you can make oxygen. You can collect it. You can generate it. But it takes energy. And usually it takes water. If you can get water, you can generate electricity and you can generate fuel. That's why the moon is such a great place to be. The moon is just 2 days away. Just 2 days, right up there. Right? Well, actually, it's right over there today. Right over there. You got lots of water on the moon. Yeah, frozen water in craters just sitting at the south pole of the moon. And yes, there's helium-3. So you have fuel and you have water, and that's all you need. Sunlight and those two components, and you can make all the energy you need, all the rocket fuel you need right there on the moon. You don't have to send any more up there. But first, you got to get the infrastructure up there. An investment needs to be made in putting that infrastructure on the moon. What is that? Are snowplow trucks electric? They are what we call diesel electric. So you have a diesel engine, and the diesel engine does two things. First, it runs a hydraulic pump. And that hydraulic pump is what runs the cylinders up and down, right and left to raise the blade, tilt the blade, and operate the bed and all the mechanisms of that. Then you also have an electrical generator so that you can run all the lights, run all the sensors and the computers and systems on the snowplow. So yes, there are an electrical generator and a chunk of deep cycle batteries, and there's also a diesel hydraulic pump. Now, sometimes that diesel engine also goes through a transmission, which goes through the differential, which goes to the drive wheels, which actually drives the vehicle. Other times, the actual drive system itself is what we call hydrostatic. That is to say, it has a transmission that runs off the turbine, which is driven by the diesel motor. So when you move the accelerator forward or to go forward or backward, what it does is it increases the pressure, or should I say stops the release of pressure from the turbine so that it can transfer that energy to the drive gears. It's called hydrostatic drive. If you've ever driven a Gator, that's made by John Deere, hydrostatic drive. You ever drive a Husqvarna lawnmower, a ride-on lawnmower, hydrostatic drive. Same kind of system. Doesn't really have gears per se, like you're going to switch gears, but it has a hydraulically driven system. Not very efficient, but it does work. Yeah, that's a 600-degree temperature swing. It can be. Depends on where you're located on the moon. Actually, at the poles, it's pretty consistent. Pretty consistent. Same temperature all the time. The sun never goes down, ever, on the poles of the moon, ever. There's a far side of the moon and a near side of the moon. They're always facing the same direction for us because the moon is tidally locked to Earth. But the poles are always exposed to the sun, and they're always exposed to Earth. Takes a little bit of work to get the solar panels aimed at the sun, but once you do, you're good to go forever. What is that? We are here with you. You are never alone. Just hospitals have a way of making you feel that way. Grab a good book to move the atmosphere under your control. That's cool. I like that. Well said, Boo. Well said. What's the excuse for not using maglev tech to power houses? Well, if you're talking about permanent magnets, neodymium magnets are very powerful magnets. Of course, all the rare earth metals that are used to make neodymium magnets are owned by China, but nevertheless, these magnets are pretty powerful. Now, you have to put the magnets in the rail, and you have to put the magnets in whatever you're going to float above it. So it's sort of like you're pressing two magnets together, North Pole to North Pole. They won't go together very easily. They will repel one another, right? It's only when you take south to north that they connect like that. But if you flip them around, they'll oppose one another. Now, ostensibly, that's work. That's work. You're lifting something. You're holding something up off the ground. That's true. But in order to generate electricity, in order to generate power from that, you have to move the magnet. The magnet staying still is not going to generate any kind of useful energy. You have to move the magnet. That's why when we look at generators, they look a little like this. They look a little bit like a pancake, like this. And this side has magnets, and this side has wire coils. And then what we do is we rotate that disc. And as we rotate the disc, of course, the magnets are moving by the coils on this side, and they're generating electricity. All that's great. All that's wonderful. But it takes work, because there's an effect that counteracts the work that you're trying to do called the Faraday effect. And we know all the formulas. We know how much horsepower it's going to take to generate that electricity. That's why when you buy a generator from Honda and you pull the pull rope or you hit the starter, you realize that you have, let's say, a 2,500 watt generator. Well, a 2,500 watt generator is going to take about 8 horsepower. 8 horsepower. Now, because the secret to life is clean glassware and conversion factors, I will tell you that a horsepower is about 750 watts. So you take 8 times 750, and what is that? About 6 kilowatts, right? 6 kilowatts of energy put out by the gasoline-powered motor. Well, why do we only get 2,500 watts of electricity out of that? Because it's at best, 45 to 50% efficient. A lot of energy is lost in the internal combustion engine. It's not as efficient as you might think. So you're burning 6,000 watts of fuel to get 2,500 watts of electricity. That's why there's no free lunch. The work has to be done by something. By a bicycle, by an engine, by a wheel, or by gravity. It has to be done by wind or water flow, or something has to make that magnet move in order to generate the electricity. And electricity might not be the only fuel or the only force that we could use. It's maybe there's something other than electrons. I don't know what it could be, because the entire known universe, everything you see, everything you touch, everything you taste, everything that is in our universe is made up of 2 things, and 2 things only: electrons and protons. That's it. Every star, every planet, every quasar, every gas particle in space. 2 particles. That's it. Electrons and protons. Nothing in between. So if we're going to use energy, you might as well use what's so plentiful in the universe, which is electrons, especially if they seem to be entering our dimension from another dimension, which kind of leads me to believe that maybe there are other particles in another dimension that we don't even know about. Interesting stuff. Interesting stuff. All right. Let's see. Do I want to talk about that story? No. let's talk about life discovered in the solar system. Now, this is pretty cool. Life discovered in the solar system. And you'd think, well, yeah, everybody knows that because we're here, right? Oh, no. If you could fly 2 billion miles in the direction of the Pegasus constellation and knew where to look, you would find a thin, flat object about the size of a football field and up to 10 times more reflective than the average comet. If you watched it for a while, you would notice that it is tumbling as it moves away from the sun. It's turning end over end roughly every 7 hours. That's pretty good revolution. The object, called Oumuamua, it passed Earth in October of 2017. I'm sure you saw the images. As it began its return to interstellar space, the Canadian astronomer Robert Wyrick identified it among the images from what was then the world's most powerful camera, a telescope in Hawaii called Pan-STARRS 1. The astronomers in Hawaii called it Oumuamua. In Hawaiian word, it means the first scout from a distant place. Oumuamua was the subject of great excitement. It was the first object humans have observed traveling through the solar system from interstellar space, but it also became controversial. Why? Well, for one thing, its shape, the way it approached us, the way it moved away, not consistent with the behavior of an asteroid or a comet. For 11 days, the world's telescope searched for meaning from this strange visitor. And a year later, the debate about Oumuamua intensified when one of the world's foremost astronomers, Avi Loeb, submitted a paper to the astrophysical journal Letters, and in it, Loeb and his colleague, Shmuel Bailey, argued that Oumuamua's strange properties indicated that it was a new class of thin interstellar material, either produced naturally through a yet unknown process or of an artificial origin. Since then, Loeb has maintained that the most rational, conservative explanation is, by Occam's razor, that Oumuamua was produced by an alien civilization. We will almost certainly never see Oumuamua again because it's headed away from the solar system at 30 kilometers a second. But Loeb says scientists must prepare now for what happens when the next such object arrives, as he believes it will be very soon. And if he's right, these objects surround us in numbers that are almost unimaginable. Avi Loeb is a fast talker. He has the rapid fluency of someone who has spent decades giving lectures. But there's also an unpracticed enthusiasm to his speech. He keeps the accent of his native Israel, although he has lived in the U.S. since 1988 when he took a fellowship at Princeton University. His first interview was with the famous physicist Freeman Dyson, who was also well known for theorizing about alien civilizations. Loeb spent most of a decade as chair of Harvard's astronomy department, the longest any scientist has held that position. He has made or helped to make a number of major breakthroughs in our understanding of the universe, including different ways of detecting exoplanets, planets orbiting stars other than our sun. He has correctly predicted incredible phenomena such as stars that streak across the depths between the galaxies at nearly 500 million miles an hour. He is the founding director of Harvard's Black Hole Initiative, part of the Event Horizon Telescope project that in April 2019 presented to the world the first photograph of a black hole. Practically all of Loeb's predictions have had the backing of his peers, except one. In autumn of 2019, Loeb and a colleague, a senior astronomer at Harvard, attended a seminar on Oumuamua. After it ended, Lerb told the reporter, I left the room together with a colleague of mine who is a conservative mainstream astronomer, and he said, this object is so weird. I wish it never existed. This is, Lerb says, a terrible thing to say for a scientist. You should accept with open arms anything that nature gives you. But he's also found that such attitudes are very common. I call it part of the religiosity of science. It's kind of a taboo on talking about extraterrestrial intelligence. Why does Lerb believe that Oumuamua was alien technology? Well, first, unlike most things in space, Oumuamua was not moving relative to what astronomers call the local standard of rest. Lerb calls this a very special frame of reference, sort of the galactic parking lot. It was not that Oumuamua visited us, but that the sun and its attendant planets, moving through space at 450,000 miles an hour, moved past it. The sun's gravity bumping it as a ship, being waked in the water disturbs a piece of the flotsam. But what really excites Lerb is what happened next. Oumuamua showed an excess push away from the sun. In addition to the sun's gravitational force acting on it, this happens with comets because they off-gas. They kind of vaporize, creating a kind of jet behind them, and so they accelerate away from the sun. But Oumuamua didn't do that. It didn't do that. Oumuamua would have to lose about 1/10 of its mass for that to happen. That's quite a lot. And it should have been seen very clear as a gas cloud around it, but it didn't happen. There was no tail. Close observation by the Spitzer Space Telescope saw nothing around it. It didn't even radiate any heat. And it did not move erratically as comets do, but accelerated smoothly away from the sun, like pressing the accelerator. The most rational explanation is that it was pushed by the sunlight itself. But Oumuamua's shape is also distinct from almost everything else we've observed in space. Its brightness varied by a factor of 10 every 8 hours. Suggesting a very extreme geometry, like metal. The most popular depiction of Oumuamua is a long cigar-shaped rock, but researched by Sergei Machenko, a computational astrophysicist at McMaster University in Canada, suggests a 91% chance that it is not shaped like that it is shaped like a disk. Each of these factors is highly unlikely for any astronomical object. Now, taken together, Lerb says they make Oumuamua a very rare object. If it's coming from the same reservoir of objects, like the Oort cloud or, the field of comets and asteroids, the belt out there that we're familiar with. For Lerb, the rational answer is to find something that fits the data, and it's familiar to us. Astronomers were able to do this in September, when another object, which is called 2020 SO, was discovered in orbit around Earth. Just like Oumuamua, 2020 SO appeared to have been pushed from its gravitational course by sunlight. At this time, NASA confirmed the 2020 SO, I'm going to bring the studio back in now. Get a little bit of music and then we'll resume. Missed it. Hey, 38-24 in the Kansas City game against Buffalo. Let me read up in the chat room here. Let's see. MAGA love tech on bullet trains, but not for houses, according to BA. Yeah, that's correct. Because all the maglev is really doing is eliminating the friction, okay? No wheels. It just lifts the train up off the rails. But those rails are very expensive because they have magnets embedded in them, and the train has magnets embedded in it. And guess what? Never made any money. Nope. Been subsidized ever since the day it was created. Not going to work for houses. Besides, why would you want your house to float? Oh, really? YouTube is buffering like mad tonight. I'm so sorry about that. I'm so sorry. But you can listen on other media. We're also live on Twitch. We're live on DLive. Just for reference, Jacob, is it buffering on DLive or is it okay? Late Night Leroy says, love that bumper mix. Is that a hammered dulcimer opener? I don't think so. I think it's a synthesizer of some kind, but it's pretty cool. Pretty cool. Yeah, Jacob says the sound is fine on DLive. So if you want to go to dlive.tv and bail from YouTube, you can do that. So 2020 SO is this object that's in orbit around Earth. It illustrates the fact that we can identify an object that behaves in a peculiar fashion. It has no cometary tail, and yet it exhibits an extra push. Lurb's biggest concern about Oumuamua is not that it had disappeared from sight, but that the response to it betrays the culture of science. The Copernican principle, the change in thinking that allows humanity to begin modern astronomy, states that we are not at the center of the universe. Blasphemy! To pretend in the face of confounding data that Oumuamua is just another asteroid is to act as if we are. Lurb's sense of scale and probability is informed by a long study of the early universe. In a 2014 paper, he described the likelihood that rocky planets with liquid water provided the chemistry to support life when the universe was as little as 10 million years old. In the 13.8 billion years since that time, billions of galaxies, each home to billions of Earth-like planets, have formed. To say that life, intelligence, and civilization have emerged only once is an expanse of time and space. It makes no sense. There's nothing more conservative than saying that if you arrange for the same circumstances, you will get the same outcome. Lurb, the conservative assumption about humanity is that we are a middle-of-the-road kind of life that exists pretty much everywhere. I don't think that we are special or unique. But if we're not unique, it follows that Oumuamua is not unique either, right? Pan-STARRS began searching for near-Earth objects in early 2014. 6 years, that's it, 6 years it's been looking. And discovered Oumuamua in under 4 years. Applying the Copernican principle, we should assume that we will see another object once every 3 or 4 years. But this frequency may change because our ability to see them is going to get much, much better. If you go to my website at brooksagnew.com, you can look up the GTN, the Global Telescope Network. You realize there are tens of thousands of people that own telescopes good enough to take a high-resolution picture of a section of space? And did you know that if we patched thousands of these images together to make a composite image of space, that we could actually see objects moving years before a regular telescope will find it? Yeah. And you know what it would cost? Pennies. You pay each one of these amateur astronomers a couple $100 a month to take one image a week. One image a week, that's it. Take one image a week and send it to the database. Your image will go in your parking place in that composite picture, and over time, over 52 weeks, you get 52 consecutive snapshots of every square inch of space from which one of these objects can come toward Earth. We're just talking about a fairly small window. But with 1,000 telescopes, we could create that image. That's the Global Telescope Network. The telescopes already exist. They're just sitting in boxes and attics and basements all over the country. What I propose is putting them to work. Yeah, putting them to work. Let them look for the near-Earth objects as a composite. Yes, I know, it's genius, but getting in front of the right person with it to make it get funded and put together. What is it, Frank? Frank Tank. Compressed air from windmills. Air runs generator at the time you need it. Well, I could see that. It would take some hellacious tanks to save up the air. There's a little bit of an energy lag there. You remember the compressed air car? I mean, anybody that's ever worked with compressed air and a gas-powered engine knows how this works, right? Yeah, you can, take a spark plug and you can put a air fitting to it, and you can put a air hose to it, and then you can screw that into the spark plug hole, and when you apply the air, it pushes the cylinder down, which turns the motor. Yeah, it's the principle behind the compressed air car. Of course, it takes more energy to compress the air than you actually get out of driving the car. Yes, the car itself is pollution-free, but the natural gas or coal that you had to burn to make the electricity to run the compressor to compress the air. I'm a certified scuba diver, okay? I know what I'm talking about. Those tanks with 2,200 pounds of air in them, they take a while to fill up with a compressor, a high-pressure compressor. Then you take that bottle and you fill up the tank that goes on your back, which is at somewhere around 600 psi. Yeah, it's a lot of pressure. And then you take that 600 psi and you regulate it down to a few inches of water with a regulator that goes in your mouth. When you breathe, that air comes from the compressed state into the uncompressed state into your lungs and counteracts the pressure of the water on your lungs. So you can breathe about as easily as you can breathe in this room. But it takes a lot of energy to compress that air to put it in the tank. So, again, it's not very efficient. The most efficient right now that we have out there is a natural gas-powered vehicle. And you can liquefy the natural gas. That's about as tight as you can get it. And some people use LP gas because it takes less energy to compress a triple carbon atom than it does a single carbon atom. But LP gas isn't very energetic. It takes a lot more of it than natural gas, which is just methane, to make the same amount of energy. If you don't believe me, get a gas-powered stove. Go ahead, get a gas-powered range top. And you'll look inside, you'll notice there are jets underneath the burner. Now, if you want to convert that over to LP gas, liquid propane gas, this is a 3-carbon gas, then you put a larger jet in. Why? Well, yes, the molecule's bigger, but it takes more of it to make the same amount of heat as methane. Natural gas is much more efficient. So natural gas, when it's applied to diesel trucks, makes them more efficient. It just does. And guess what byproduct you get when you take CH3, that's carbon and 3 hydrogens, that's methane gas. Guess what you get when you combust it, when you oxidize the carbon, which is what makes the energy. You get CO2 and water. That's it. That's all the pollutants you get. No nitrous oxides, no we'll call hydrocarbon pollution. It's just water vapor. and CO2. And plants love CO2. So these natural gas-fired power plants don't pollute. They're clean. They're clean. As clean as the air from a cow. So look at, you're exhausting CO2 and water when you breathe. Yes, you are. Same exact reaction. Of course, you don't burn up, but you can turn peanut butter into eye tissue. All right, let's do a little bit of a CERN update here. We could talk about energy all night long. I'll take all questions from anybody. I've been in the business my entire life, so I know what I'm talking about. And I'm not a naysayer. I'm an explorer. Trust me, I'm the guy that has 2 electric trucks that I built with my own hands. Okay? I know what I'm talking about. You don't believe me? Go to my website. I'll put it in the chat room just so you can see, just for yourself. electric-pickup-truck.com. Okay? You go to this website and you can learn all about it. There it is. So you go there and you'll see. So I'm with you. I'm totally with you. I have a space underneath that truck that's about this big. I know this other hand's off the screen here, but that's okay. It's this big. I'll move it over. Yeah? There we go. Now we got it in the frame. That technology that you're talking about, that really super high efficient source of energy, it goes in that space. And I have people that have heard me and have called me, and I've been to their labs and I've looked at their stuff. And they're close. They're close. At least it makes it more efficient. At least we actually created our own battery charger. You know why? Because nobody's battery charger does what ours does. Our battery charger is specifically designed to protect and elongate the lifespan of a single battery. And it works. It works. And it's cheaper than a battery management system plus a charger. So I took hundreds of dollars of cost out of my vehicle, and I made the batteries last for a lifetime. Kansas City Chiefs have won. So it's going to be Kansas City and Tampa Bay in the Super Bowl. Should be a pretty exciting Super Bowl, I think. CERN update. Thank your lucky stars that you are alive. Because we live in some pretty cool times. There's pretty cool stuff happening. Yeah. Okay. Jacob, we've talked about thorium before. Thorium is one of the daughters of uranium on the chart of the nuclides. Uranium decays into a variety of daughters. One of them is radon. Another is thorium. And it is radioactive, but over a long term. The half-life of thorium is not useful. Thorium batteries never worked. Plutonium batteries work. Plutonium battery will last about 20 years. It will put off heat and electricity for about 20 years, and then it'll play out. It's very useful in space because it's freaking cold in space. It's cold on the moon. So it's nice to have a battery that can keep your electronics warm and generate electricity for a long time. But we don't use plutonium batteries on Earth. Too dangerous. Too dangerous. You don't want somebody just throwing away a plutonium battery. It could be used for, dirty stuff. We don't. It's not natural. Plutonium doesn't exist in nature. We made that. What is this question? Can I speak on the Hollow Earth expedition? Yes, let's do that the last segment. We got about 15 minutes left in this segment, and I will talk about the Hollow Earth expedition in the last segment. Yes, I did have the game, but the sound was off. Okay, so it is one of the monitors up here, and I was not actually watching the game. I was keeping an eye on the game. So you thank your lucky stars that you're alive because it's truly a miracle of nature. And this has nothing to do with spirituality or religion and everything to do with science. Life itself may not be the miracle. Although we haven't found it elsewhere yet, our galaxy alone is so replete with Earth-like planets that, mathematically speaking, one of them must hold life, even if it's just microbial. Same thing on the interior of the planet. Now, what CERN scientists say as a result of their latest experiment is the universe itself is a big miracle. It, like the bumblebee, shouldn't exist at all. This, of course, taken in reference to the Big Bang theory. I maintain in all of my books that the Big Bang never happened. That it is our consciousness, our presence in the universe, that slowed the entire universe down so we can behold it. Because at the speed of light, the Big Bang never happened. Everything had to slow down for mass to become. According to the Big Bang, the universe began as a point the size of a grain of sand that was unimaginably hot, unfathomably dense, and packed tight with matter and energy. And then, for a reason we still cannot explain, we think it was Higgs that described it. That's why we named the boson after him. It exploded, sending its contents sailing out and eventually forming the universe as we know it. Now, there's a few problems with this theory. For one, there's the increasing rate of universal expansion. It's changing. It's not just blowing apart. The rate at which it's blowing apart is increasing. It's known as the Hubble constant. Now, according to the Big Bang, things should be slowing down like any explosion. We tend toward entropy. Things begin to slow down or even begin contracting again, going back toward a black hole. Dark energy, the conventional explanation, even though can't prove that exists either. And there's another problem. And here's where CERN scientists come in. The environment that produced the particles that make up the universe as we know them now should have created equal parts of matter and antimatter. And yet the latter is surprisingly rare. Antimatter doesn't exist. Very, very rare. And not only that, a 50-50 split would have seen each particle uniting with its polar opposite, creating another burst of unimaginable energy and leaving nothing, pure energy, behind, save a vast howling void of a cosmos. And yet, here we are. One theory is that matter and antimatter must in some way be radically different. But the latest CERN experiment does not find this is the case. According to the standard model, which is, I don't know if you've ever done matrix mathematics. I'm sure you did. If you took college algebra, you took matrix mathematics. That's what the standard model is. And what we typically do is we run the standard model with various forces and various values, and we don't like to get answers like infinity, and we don't like to get answers like 0. And so we put in constants and values on either side of the equation to get rid of those two numbers, infinity and 0, and what's left is, we think, results that are repeatable and reliable. And that's why we use the standard model. Is it workable? Is it sensible? Maybe. Maybe, because we don't actually empirically see those values in the universe. But in this study, certain scientists tried to discern what fundamental difference, such as particles, what they should have. What is the difference to validate the existence of the cosmos? And they came up empty. Now, I maintain that there are only two particles in the third dimension. There's electrons and there's protons. That's it. I also maintain that not all the protons are created equal. That is to say, they weigh different amounts. Chemically, they're identical. They're identical. A carbon is a carbon is a carbon is a carbon. An iron is iron is iron is iron. Hydrogen is the most common proton in the universe, and it's the same. Everywhere you go, everybody has the same hydrogen on the shelf. Everyone, every planet, every star. And I maintain that those protons are actually holograms. They're holograms, stochastically arranged frequencies, energies of different vibrations that form that proton. We know this because we've shattered the little beggars apart. We've smashed them hundreds of thousands and millions of times. And we see the same frequencies coming out of it, like shards of glass. We have measured them. We know what makes them up. But for all of that, we cannot make a single proton. We can reverse the system. We can turn on the same frequencies, but we can't make them come together as a proton. Some difference between going from chaos, as Jacob is saying, chaos theory, going from chaos to going to the third dimension seems to defy the second law of thermodynamics, which is everything tends, to entropy. Everything decays. Okay? Everything that's in motion should stay in motion unless something gets in its way. There is an inertia, which is the first law of thermodynamics, and then there's the tending toward the lowest possible ground or energy state. Now, there are two views of the universe. I tend toward what's called the Hamiltonian. The Hamiltonian is you take all of the negative energy and all the positive energy, add it together, and that's the view of the universe. The other, which is taking all the positive energy and subtracting the negative energy from it, and that's what you're left with. But the problem is sort of like the marble in the trough. You've used those hula hoops before, right? That have like a bead in them. So as you're swirling it around your waist, you get that bead that swings around on the inside. Think of that hula hoop as the Hamiltonian of the universe. Yes, it's a big curved circle, but let's just talk about the bottom half for a while. It doesn't take much to see that the marble is going to fall to the lowest point. That's the lowest energy state in the universe. You still have the positive, you still have the negative, but the marble is going to find the lowest point in the trough to go through. If it moves up the side of the trough, some kind of energy must be inputted, and it must be directed. It can't be chaotic, because as a chaos, it's just going to cancel itself out. It's just going to destructively interfere with itself. It must constructively interfere with itself. And it must not only constructively interfere with itself, it must interfere along a certain instantaneous rate of change, which we call the slope. That slope, we now know, is the golden mean. If it's off of that slope, it will eventually decay and die. But for some reason, protons fit that slope. They fit that slope. All of the elements in the periodic chart arrange themselves on Fibonacci ratios. All the planets around solar systems, all galaxies, all superclusters, they all arrange themselves. All subatomic particles and molecular particles, and even the growth of bacteria and the arrangement of cellulose in a tree or a flower or shell, all follow this instantaneous rate of change called the golden mean. Our faces, our structure, the way our DNA expresses itself as a human body, all lays out according to this instantaneous rate of change called the golden mean, which we call the Fibonacci Spiral. I teach a whole class on this, which you can find at my website under webinars. Easy to find, brooksagnew.com. Click on the webinars link. It's a $47 class. 5.5 hours of instruction live. It's not even pre-recorded. Yeah. 2 Saturdays a month. We go through that, and we go through master journaling so that you can get better at manifesting your own future. CERN is finally figuring it out. That there's more to it than just particles and energy. There's also consciousness. They're chasing protons and antiprotons. They think it's the last holdout when it came to particles, which could explain the matter-antimatter imbalance. Scientists from Mainz University in Germany devised a manner to assess the magnetism of a particle of antimatter. It's 350 times more precise than previous methods. And the readout was incredible, to 9 decimal places. That's pretty good. A proton has the same level of magnetism, only it's positive. Although the study failed to explain our universe and its extreme prejudice toward matter, it did give us a far better understanding of the antiproton's magnetism. Quick break with TFR. We'll let them take a break, and then we will continue to talk. Antiproton was hot. What does that mean? You had an ant whose name was Proton? That's very cool. I think if I had a dog, I would name it Proton. Yeah, I would. No, I don't. I have 2 cats, Doug and Steve. No, I didn't name the cats, but they're full-on cats now. They're not kittens anymore. They don't play much except with each other. What is it, 7P? Everything is whatever the collective agrees. Observer effect. Everything is a wave until the conscious observes it. That's partially true. There is an average reality. It is a normal distribution of manifestation. The average reality is exactly what he's saying. It is a collection, not a collective. I avoid that word. It's a collection of all the sentient beings in the universe that creates an average reality. But it is not the only reality. It's a normal distribution curve. So at the upper end of the curve, in the top 0.15% or 0.13%, you have the extremes, and then lower you have the extremes, negative and positive. And there are individuals and consciousnesses that exist in those tail conditions as well. And the average does change. It does move around, depending on, as you said, if everybody gets the same idea, then the average reality changes. The question is, how does everybody get the same idea? Well, there are a couple ways. One is like the 100th monkey. All of a sudden, everybody wakes up one day and boom, we all have the same idea and off we go. Not very plausible. Don't see that happen. In marketing and in mathematics and socioeconomic mathematics, we look at this all the time. What starts a trend? What makes something go viral? Well, it actually is a much, much smaller effect. 1 person, 2, maybe 5, can actually shift the average reality. How do they do that? They do it by reaching a activation energy of leadership or presence in the sociology. It's sort of like hollering fire in a movie theater. I mean, it is a little like that. If everybody's wearing blue one day and all of a sudden 1 person comes to school wearing red, like in the movie Wall-E, everybody changes to red. Why? Because 1 person wore red? No, because it achieved an activation energy in the consciousness of the population and everything shifted. It's why, renaissances happen. It's why industrial revolutions or spiritual awakenings occur. Because 1 or 2 people make a breakthrough and it clicks and you create this constructive interference in the system and it resonates and grows of its own accord. And we do the same thing. I promised you I would give you a Hollow Earth update, and I'm going to. So, as you know, we built the website, and the website looks really, really good now and has some functionality to it that I want to discuss with you. So there's the link, and I'm going to go ahead and put the page up so you can see it. So it's npiee.com, nippy.com. That's just the way we say it. It means North Pole Inner Earth Expedition. I didn't want to call it the Hollow Earth Expedition because it sounded kind of hokey. So I call it the North Pole Inner Earth Expedition. And, of course, we have some very good staff with us. We have Brad Olson and Suzanne Ross, and we have Doc Skinner, and we have others that are working with us that are handling small areas of the expedition to make it easier to put the whole project together. Now, I shared with you my producer, Doc Skinner, and his Indiegogo, which was for the movie Sky, The Rise of Jet Parker 2. And this is one of the efforts that's going to get this going. I know. You have to do one thing before you can do another, and this is why. Because we believe that it is going to take a fair amount of capital to make this happen. And we've done the budgets, we've run them for years, and we have found that it's going to take about $3.5 to $4.5 million to make the expedition happen. Yes, it's expensive for a couple of reasons. And we have had many, many meetings over the years to try to find cheaper ways to doing it, but there's no more practical way of doing it. We believe that this area of the planet, this 10,000 square mile area, about 100 miles by 100 miles, needs to be accessed at sea level. You can't fly over it. No one's going to fly over it low enough to get a view of it. It's always covered in clouds. It's never been sailed ever in the history of the world. There are no maritime records from this area at all. There is only one class of ships that are capable of making this journey, and that's the Arctica class. The Arctica class ship is owned and built by the Russian shipping company called Murmansk. Murmansk, that's the way they say it up there. But we would say Murmansk. And these nuclear-powered icebreakers are the only ships that are capable of making this journey. To charter the ship is about $2.5 million. I expect it will take 15 days with a 5-day option. 15 days with a 5-day option. What it basically means is this. The journey there and back to where we want to go and surveying this area of the ocean requires an icebreaker, not an ice-rated hull. We need to crunch ice for days to get to where we're going. And we need to take about 100 to 125 passengers. This is the only ship capable of doing it. And that's what it costs. 15 days plus a 5-day option. If we get out there and we find something, a fissure, an opening in the crust, some life form we didn't expect or has never been seen before, we don't want to just up and leave because we need to be back at the port at a certain time. So we exercise an option while we're at sea to take another 5 days. It costs money for the option. It costs money to reserve those days. And that's what it costs. Then, those 125 people, they're not going to be tourists. We're not doing that. We tried that. We tried selling seats for $30,000 a seat. And you know what we started getting? Rich tourists. That's not the Hollow Earth expedition you want to see. What you want to see is a serious scientific exploration into what's going on the seafloor. What is the seawater like? What is the air like? What is the magnetism like? What is the energy like? What is the aurora like? What will a consciousness signal do at that area of the planet where no human has ever been before? These are all great questions. They are great scientific questions. And we need great scientists to be able to gather that data because we're only going to do this once. Maybe. And so those scientists are at Harvard, they're at Cambridge, they're at Stanford, they're at Washington University. There are various places around the world, and we've invited those scientists to join us. And then it takes a film crew. It's not just a videographer running around the ship. Oh, no, 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 no. It's a team of videographers. Because you remember at this time of year we're going, the sun never sets. It's up all the time, 24 hours a day. That means we film 24 hours a day. That means it takes 3, 4 film crews to keep those cameras going all the time. Why? Because in that 15 days, we're going to collect between 3,000 and 4,000 hours of video. Oh, yeah. All those scientists doing their experiments, all the things we drop over the side of the boat and recover, all the helicopter trips, all the submersible views, everything. Who wants to see that? You do. You do. So we have garnered satellite access from the ship. We're going to stream in packets, 4 channels the whole time, from the ship to the satellite. The satellite will then distribute to 2 continents, Europe and the United States. And then it'll be syndicated from there out to pay-per-view people. We think this is the way to pay for this venture. I'm not running an Indiegogo. No, 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 no. I'm not running a GoFundMe. We tried that. It doesn't work. We don't have the money to make it work. We already have 20 million fans around the planet. 20 million. 17 million Japanese watched our documentary in one night in Japan on Nippon Television Network. And that, by the way, was in 2007. Yeah, I told you we've been at this for a while. We need a way to reach the 20 million fans. 20 million fans giving 25 cents, 1/4, once, would give us enough money to run this expedition. And no one would own it but us. We would distribute everything we see, and you would see it first. 25 cents. But the reality is that the tech giants are preventing us from reaching those 20 million fans. We can't reach them, not without spending a whole bunch of money. And we're talking maybe $250,000 to reach 20 million people. Not going to happen. I don't have $250,000 to put into that kind of marketing plan. We rely on you. You sharing this or this website with your social media. And then they share it with theirs, and then they share it with theirs, and they share it with theirs, and that's the way it works. Right now, we have less than 100 subscribers. And they're putting their money in, and I'm putting my money in, and it's slowly accumulating. But we're not going to make it. We have to have the deposit. That means we need $2 million by October of this year. Yeah, because it's 2021, and we're not going until the summer of 2022. But you have to have the deposit in by November of this year to reserve the ship. And then you have to have the balance of the money by spring. So you could see the dilemma. It's why we pushed it out. I had already scheduled and been booked for more than a dozen appearances around the world to talk about it in front of people live. Every single appearance was canceled because of COVID. I didn't reach anybody. Just here on this YouTube and Facebook and Twitch and D-Live and YouTube. That's it. That's the only people I can reach. Very, very small audience, maybe a couple hundred people. But as I said, one person or 2 people can change the average reality. What we're talking about here is the greatest expedition in the history of this earth. No one has ever spent this kind of money to explore any area of this earth. This is an entire year's budget for Discovery Channel or History Channel or National Geographic Channel. Entire year's budget. And you know how much money they want to contribute to this expedition? None. 0. That's not what they do. What they do is they resell airtime. That's all they do. They just sell advertisement and resell the airtime. Do you know who pays for the documentaries that go on there? You do. You pay for them. Discovery Channel doesn't pay for them. You know what an episode of Deadliest Catch costs to produce? Less than $10,000. Less than $10,000. Some of them are cheaper than that. This is way outside their budget. That's why we have developed Hollow Earth TV. Yes, Hollow Earth TV. Go to the website. It's all there. And you become part of it for less than $9. Come on. $9. And if you tell 100 friends and they join, or a few people join at the premium level so they can access the live streaming from the ship when it comes, that's even better. Yes, there's room for investors, of course. If you want to buy a seat on the ship, we do have some discretionary seats, about 20 of them. But 20 people spending $25,000 is $1 million or $500,000. That doesn't get us there. It doesn't get us there. You understand? You can't just sell seats to people who are going to be in the bathroom barfing the whole time. These are the roughest seas on the planet. Just ask Brad Olson what it's like at sea at those latitudes. It's rough. It's not easy at all. And the bigger the ship, the harder the toss. Yeah, you have more confidence that the ship is going to take it. But 100-foot swells are 100-foot swells. No matter how you look at it, it's rough. So that's my Hollow Earth update. See if there are any questions about what I'm covering here. That's a good question. Madlink says, will the stream be put on the replay? Yes, but recall now, when you're watching it live, you have 4 channels to choose from. You can look at 4 different things anytime you come on, anytime, 24 hours a day, 2 o'clock in the morning in London, noon in Arizona, no problem. Get on and you can watch the entire thing, binge the whole 15 days and watch us 24 hours a day. All of that footage is being recorded, but as I said, it's about 3,000 hours of video. And that's where the rest of the money comes in, because there's post-production work. We go through and we can take the video from all of those cameras and all those experiments and all those weird, quirky moments with scientists discovering something, or some ship that shows up off of our bow and hovers for a couple of hours and then leaves. All those things, that happen. We'll produce that into a series of videos, which maybe can finance further trips to go. So yes, it will be made for replay, but if you have not signed up or registered or subscribed to these channels, you're not going to have access to it. That's where the value is added. That's where the value is added. And what we want to do is return the value to the people. All of it. We're not going to hold any of it back. If we discover something exciting, you're going to see it live. We're not going to cut away. Just become some UFO came up out of the water and say, hey, what are you guys doing here? You're not going to miss it. You're going to be right there and see it. And Earth is going to learn something about itself. It's going to learn the way our planet is structured. It's going to learn that inner ocean that was discovered a few years ago by damping waves through the examination of seismic data, it really exists. And the ocean water on the inside of the planet is blending with the ocean water on the outside of the planet. And what's moving in the blend is life. We don't know what the life can be. We don't know if it's going to be just, stingrays or sharks or plankton or whatever, but it's going to be magnificent. It's going to be the discovery of a whole new Earth. And that's why we're doing it. Because we're not afraid. We're going to go and see. Now, we might just see whales and ice, and that's the end of it. So what? We did it. We went and we disproved the hypothesis that the Earth might be hollow. Great. That's what we want to learn. But to sit here in the 40th parallel or the 25th parallel or the 33rd parallel, Cairo, and say, the earth is hollow, I know, because I visited in my dreams, is a load of crap. So I'm with you, James. I'm with all of you. We want to make this happen. So the Super Bowl's going to be in Tampa? Well, that's interesting. I'm never going to make it. I was looking at spaceship launches today, thinking I would like to go see a space launch. So I went to the Artemis site, and I discovered, sadly, the Artemis program has been delayed because of a misfire. Oh my gosh. I forgot to bring the studio back in. All that great audio. The TFR listeners missed it. I'm so sorry. So sorry about that. Drone, are you still out there? I forgot to bring the studio back in. It's been like 16 minutes. Are you still out there listening, or has it gone to automated on TFR? I'm just asking. I know Lucky said, in case you look in here, Brooks, please reconnect. I just reconnected. Just give me a heads up that it worked. So since December of 2017, hey, all right, we're back. Since December of 2017, NASA has been working toward the goal of sending the next man and first woman to the moon by 2024, which will be the first crewed lunar mission since the Apollo program. Originally, it was hoped that the first uncrewed flight of the SLS and Orion, which is the Artemis 1, would take place later this year, but according to the recent statements by Associate Administrator Steve Jerzik, this inaugural launch will most likely take place mid to late 2021. I hate to see it slip. This is the latest in a series of delays for the high-profile project, and it's very high-profile because we're not just talking about the launch to the moon, we're talking about the gateway, the lunar gateway. Jerzik also claimed that the administration was making progress on other pieces of the mission architecture, like the development of modules and systems that will go into the creation of the lunar gateway. Blue Origin recently had a successful launch. Starship did not have a successful launch. It splatted. And now serial number 9 has been delayed a couple of times, and hopefully we get to see the launch to 15 kilometers this week, but we'll see. But it includes awarding contracts to Northrop Grumman, Innovation Systems, and Maxar Technologies to build the habitation and logistics outpost and power and propulsion element. And there are others too. There's Planetoid Mines and other companies that have received small contracts for retro rockets or robots or rovers. And then there's the lunar lander element, for which NASA issued an open call for concepts back in September of 2019. They've got a lot of great ideas. Contracts have been awarded to Lockheed Martin and Boeing and Northrop Grumman and Blue Origin and Draper. I mean, a lot of these are private companies. And right now they're receiving NASA money, but companies like SpaceX are also receiving money from commercial work. They've been launching the Starlink satellites. 143 of them went up this morning. It was a picture-perfect launch. Everything was great. By the way, the Falcon booster that came back, that's its 5th return. It has launched to space and been back 5 times successfully. You think we're going back on that? No. You know why? Because the gold rush is on, baby. The gold rush is on. Whether NASA wants to participate or not, it is going to go forward. Maybe not with the lunar gateway, because that is a very big multinational effort. But getting to the moon is more than half the battle. The lunar gateway is an element in the Moon to Mars plan. Since Virtual Joe has become president, I can guarantee you that program's going to be stripped to the diapers. Oh yeah, it's going to be stripped to, they're going to get rid of the receptionist and everything. Believe me, all that money is going to be stripped out and it's going to other things, because that's what socialists do. But it doesn't mean that the Earth to moon is going to end. Why? Because there's a $10 trillion sitting on the moon, 2 days away from here. Do you think you can keep these private companies away from there? No, you cannot. On June 7, 2019, President Trump tweeted, NASA should not be talking about going to the moon. We did that 50 years ago. It should be focused on the much bigger things we are doing, including Mars. This was followed by similar statements made back in September during the visit of Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison. And this is what he told reporters. We're going to Mars. We're stopping at the moon. The moon is actually a launching pad. That's why we're stopping at the moon. Hey, we've done the moon. That's not so exciting. So we'll be doing the moon, but we'll really be doing Mars. It's true, but you can't make it to Mars without the moon. You have to have the fusion rocketry to make this practical. Now, this stands in contrast to Project Artemis. Artemis is a very convoluted, very complex thing. Artemis has had several delays. Artemis is all about getting to the moon faster, even if it meant serious shakeups at the agency. In the wake of Vice President Pence's announcement in March of 2019, there have also been changes in terms of the design for mission architecture. A lot of things have changed. Lunar landers changed, the boosters have changed, the habitats have changed, the Orion capsule changed. NASA awarded billions of dollars in development and production contracts to support flights beyond Artemis 1. But the flight schedule has changed frequently due to a lack of clear requirements and time frames for planned capability upgrades. Limited NASA oversight also places efforts to plan and execute future flights at risk of adverse outcomes, such as increased costs or delays. For example, NASA is committed to establishing cost and schedule performance baselines for these efforts, but it plans to do so too late in the acquisition process to be useful as an oversight tool. You can't do oversight on something you've already spent the money for. In addition, the senior leaders at NASA, they do not receive consistent and comprehensive information at quarterly briefings on future efforts. You know why that is? Because people are doing stuff. And if people are doing stuff, they don't want to meet about doing stuff. It's moving too fast. By the time you get a quarterly report, that work is already done and they're moving on to the next thing. I'm just telling you. Originally, the long-awaited return to the moon was slated to happen no sooner than 2028, giving the SLS and the Gateway plenty of time to be completed. This would not ensure that lunar missions would be sustainable and keep going after the next crewed missions to the surface, but that NASA would be well positioned to set its sights on Mars next. Well, all of that has changed. All of that have changed because it always changes when we change presidents. Because we don't just change presidents. We also change cabinets. We also change budget leaders. We also change budgetary focus. Right now, the focus is on spending as much of your money as they can get their hands on. Those tax cuts, they're going to be gone. And all of these space programs are going to be truncated, in as much as we're talking about money for NASA. But all that means is the oversight disappears. It doesn't mean that the private companies are not going to set their sights on the moon and get there anyway. Go ahead, set your sights on Mars. In the meantime, there's going to be a dozen companies that have become multi-trillion-dollar companies off the resources on the moon. This is X Squared Radio. We talk about this stuff twice a week, every Wednesday, every Sunday at 8 p.m. I'm the host, Brooks Agnew, and I'll be here live as often as I can. I very, very rarely do a recorded show. And I want you to go out and look for the good in people every day. And we need you to do that more now than ever, because we don't have a message of hope anymore. We don't have the leadership of America anymore. It is now a global message. And it's maybe going to suck the life out of us, but we got to keep going, because where we go one, we go all. My name is Brooks Agnew, and I say peace, Earth Explorers. Now go and do. And do great things. And make sure that you take care of one another, take care of yourselves.